Okay, now we're going to cover another basic PHP. The last time we talked about it, we were using two files. This time we're using one file. It's the starting executable, and it's not an HTML, it's all PHP. It's PHP driven, and we're running our HTML within the PHP. So looking at this, we still have our basic form, which would be a PHP form. And we'd use a post or a get to get the information, and we just enter numbers here and make sure you don't hit the enter key until you get to the next one. It's not set up that way. So here we go. Speed of train B 52, distance between trains, let's just put a 5. Now when I send form, this is the information it's going to execute. It tells A and B the miles per hour, and the sum of the two is 5. So remember those old word problems we used to have in grade school? This would make it much easier. Now when I'm ready to do the next one, I go back again. I go back here and I enter it. Now if I enter I don't have anything, if I enter incorrectly, like I don't enter anything in B, but I do put something in miles, it's going to give an error message at the top and redisplay the form. Okay, so that's how it runs. And remember, we have to start our XAMPP, localhost, my totrains.php is inside my htdocs file folder. So I'm going to go look at my file folder. There is my htdocs in my XAMPP. And I also put it in a separate folder on my in-class. But they all have to be in the htdocs. And also remember that you only type in after the localhost everything after the htdocs. All right, let's look at some of the code now. Again, it's a PHP file, but we're going to be displaying through a browser, so we still start out with our HTML format, our doc type, our HTML, our head, our titles, everything we need. But right after the body, we start our PHP. Now remember, anything that is in a function will not automatically execute. Only things outside of function will automatically execute. So validate input will not execute until I manually call it. So we'll come back to this one and look at the code after we go down and look at what is going to auto execute. Okay, we have another function, display form, because I don't want to display the form all the time. But here where we start PHP, here is where we close that function. Now we're looking at code starting on line 43 that's auto-executed. It is not inside of any function. So I have a Boolean that is set to either show the form or not show the form. An error count set to 0 to begin with to keep up with how many errors I have when the user enters the information. And my two speeds and my distance is all set to blanks or to nothing, nulls. All right, here's where we first start. If is set, meaning have I typed something in to a particular area that I check, or have I selected it? So remember, anytime from PHP, when I want to go grab something from a form, one variation of it, we'll change it later, but one variation is I go after the post and what's the name of the element that I want to get the information from. So I just want to check to see if the submit button has been selected. If it has, then I want to validate the input from what I was entered into speed A's element. And this is also what I'm passing to that information, to that function. If it comes back good, then I'm going to put what comes back in speed A. Same thing in B, same thing in distance. So let's go up and look at the validate input. Okay. Remember, I'm still running PHP. So I catch my post in my data. I catch whatever else I put literally that I passed in my field name. Now I'm going to use a global error count so that it's available in all functions and outside the function. Normally we don't do anything with the variable except just put information in it. But since I want to make sure I have access to it everywhere else, it's global. It's still going to be defined by what is entered into it. Now there are some manual functions from the library I'm pulling in, and you could go to any of the links I've given you, W3 Schools, PHPNet, any of them, and go to the string handling, and you'll find all of the functions that are available there. So one of the error checks is I have to have entered something in. So I'm checking to see if it's less than or equal to 0, the string length. There's other ways to check this. This is just one of the ways I'm doing it. If this is true, then I'm going to make sure it's a required field and add 1 to my error count and set my variable that I'm returning to blanks. If that's not true, then I've entered something, then I want to do some other checks on it. I want to trim all the spaces off of it, put it in my variable. Then I want to strip all the slashes or symbols out of it, put it back in the variable, and then check to see if, after all that's done, that is a numeric. I don't want an alphanumeric, I want numeric. Now, once that's true, I want to make sure they entered something greater than a 0, not the length, the actual value. Every time one of my error checks returns true, I add 1 to my error count. Now, if none of these are true, then it means it's valid. Or I'm sorry, if one of these are, if this one's true, it's not valid. If this one's true, then it's is not true. I'm sorry, if this one is false, then that means that it's not numeric. And again, I add another one. If it passes all validation, then I return my variable with something in it. Otherwise, it won't have anything in it. So let's go right back down from where this was called. And it does that to every single one of these. Now I'm ready to go on to see if I need to do my calculations. If my error count is 0, then I set my show form to false, else make sure it's true. If it's true, then I can go through and check to see if I have an error count. If this is greater than 0, please re-enter the information. Display the form again. And I'll come back to that display form. If it's not true, I don't need to redisplay the form. Then I got valid information. I'm ready to do my calculations. So I can round, and that's on a standard 5 round. Okay, so I'm rounding it, doing all the calculations I need to calculate. Once I get my distance A and distance B, I'm rounding them to divide, and again, to 2, time A, time B. Then I just echo out. Anything in the quotes will echo. The variables will display because I'm still in PHP, not in HTML. If I want any HTML to actually take hold here, as long as I type it in like this, BR for a break, it will go ahead and do a line break, but still do the new line for PHP. When I end my else block, close it, I'm done. Now the one thing we need to look at is our display form, because the very first time through, this both is true, so I display the form with nothing else. So let's go up to the display form because we have HTML in this. So I catch it with these 3 pieces of information. Now, this closes my PHP, whether it was passed in to close the PHP or from any of the other PHP I need to close before I hit HTML. So now I'm in HTML mode. And I just simply put any HTML I want in here. Now, if I did happen to want to do any PHP in this, such as this value and my echoes within my inputs, notice that I just tell it, turn on the PHP, do whatever I need in PHP, turn it off when I'm done. Okay? And I end my form. I start PHP again right after I'm done with my HTML. So this is how we can work with all of our information inside of just one file. Now, if I tried to name this a 2trains.htm instead of a PHP, I would run into problems. I have this with my PHP. What happens if I tried to save it as an HTM? I have one out there saved as an HTM. What does it look like? It goes out and finds all of this information that is inside of PHP, and it just shows the code. It doesn't do any of the work. It shows it as an HTML file and doesn't recognize any of the PHP. So that's why we work with our PHP, because it is PHP based. That is another look into basic PHP. We'll have one more that takes it to a new level before we work on some of the higher levels. But within what you're working with in the last video, plus this 2trains video, it should give you enough experience to be able to work to complete your lab. All right. Good luck. Call me if you need me.